بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته everybody. Jazakumullah khairan as always for the opportunity to speak at TDC. It's always my favorite convention. Everybody's really warm and welcoming, and I really enjoy hearing the unique speakers, so I'm always excited to be here, alhamdulillah. And today I wanted to talk about something that's really special to me, because I use the concepts that I'm going to talk about here today a lot in my work, in my profession, which is in therapy. I'm a mental health therapist. And so today we're going to be talking about taking advantage of the present moment, living within the present in order to achieve our goals. And it's going to be based on my all-time favorite surah. This surah has been my favorite since I was a really little girl. And it's Surah Al-Asr, وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ, that one. And I remember when I was maybe around 8 years old, my family and I were on a vacation in Egypt where my dad and his family are from. And we were driving from one city into another city, which was on the coast near the Red Sea. So it was a really, really far drive. It took about 8 hours. And the majority of the drive is through a desert. And as we were driving, it was a Friday, and we saw a masjid, so we stopped to pray Jum'ah. And in this masjid, there was, and I mean, like I'm an American-born, like half Egyptian person. My Arabic is not all that great, so I could only understand a little bit of what the imam was saying. But I understood enough to know that he was talking about Surah Al-Asr. And I felt like, like your little 8-year-old self, where you're excited because you actually understand something that's being talked about by an adult. And I felt like this khutbah was just for me, right? Like this was super special. In the masjid in the middle of nowhere, he's talking about my favorite surah. And one thing that I remember from that khutbah is that he said that there's a hadith of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ where, there's Imam al-Shafi'i radiallahu anh. He says that if people were to reflect upon Surah Al-Asr, just on Surah Al-Asr, it would be sufficient for them. And so as a little girl, knowing that this was my favorite surah, and I mean, I know why this was my favorite surah. It probably was one of the favorites of a lot of you because it's so short, right? And it's one that we actually got to memorize when we were young. But as I grew older, I started to get a really newfound appreciation for this surah. And I started to really understand why Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah talked about this surah in such a profound way. That it provides a recipe for success. That when we are feeling as though we're at a loss, when we're feeling lost in our lives, when we're feeling hopeless, when we're feeling stagnant, that no matter what we're doing, we just don't seem to be moving forward. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provides a divine solution in this surah, and that's what I'm hoping to convey to us today, inshallah. The focus of this surah in terms of gaining success in this life and in the hereafter talks about al-asr, right? Where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala swears by time. And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala swears by something, that means that it's something significant. It means it's something that we should be aware of. And every single moment that passes us by is something that we can make the choice to either take full advantage of it or to allow ourselves to just be bystanders in our own lives and allow our lives to pass us by. And so we make that conscious choice. So in fact, the Rasul ﷺ, he said that there are two blessings which many people waste. One is health, and the other one is free time. Two very significant things. The Rasul ﷺ also talked about how on the Day of Judgment, we're going to be facing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and our feet are going to be planted on the ground in front of us, and they will not move until we're questioned about 5 things. And the first thing that we're going to be questioned about from those 5 things is our life and how we spent it. And what is our life except moments put together, right? It's time. And it's how we choose to spend each moment. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows each and every one of us in this room, inshallah, to experience living this next 24-hour period, when He decrees that we're still going to be alive within the next 24 hours, we're each gifted with the same exact thing, that 24 hours, that time frame, right? But what differentiates us is how we use that time. That differentiates us incredibly. So what does that mean to our life today? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Asr, He says, "Wal asr," by time, "Innal insana lafi khusr." He says, verily, indeed, mankind is in loss. That every single person is in a state of loss. And then he gives 4 exceptions. He tells us the 4 things that we need in order to save ourselves from being in loss. But what kind of loss can we talk about here today? The kind that I'm focusing in on is the loss of taking the value of our time. And how do we prevent ourselves from being in a state of loss with regards to this? Is by being fully present and using each moment to its fullest potential. You see, we know that using each moment to the fullest is going to be beneficial to us in the akhirah, right? We know on the day of judgment that we're going to be facing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and we're going to be given our book of deeds. And in that book of deeds, we're going to see every single moment of our entire lives played back to us, written for us to see. Every single second, every single choice, every single decision, every single word, every single thing that we set our eyes on, every single thing, every moment is going to be recorded for us, right? So we know how living in the present moment, taking advantage of the present moment is going to be advantageous to us in the hereafter. But how does it benefit us in this life, the life that we're living right now? Because sometimes we struggle to see that far in advance, to see our life in the hereafter. So how does it benefit us now? Some of the worst days that we experience in our lives are what I call the blah days, right? The days when you have so much on your to-do list, but instead of doing any of it, you find yourself on Netflix for hours, right? And the day ends and you haven't achieved anything. And you feel so blah, right? You feel horrible. And what happens is that the next day you suffer even more because now you've delayed the inevitable and now you have the deadlines approaching even closer and even closer. And so your choice in that moment led to more anxiety in the next moment, right? There are certain days that we face things that are tragic, right? Things that we have no control over. And those are days that live on in our memories for a long time. And we struggle with that, right? But then there are days where the pain is self-inflicted, where we have the moments in our hands, we know what we need to do, but we waste them away. We decide that instead of doing what we need to do, it's gonna feel better to veg out in front of the TV. And then we regret it, right? That self-inflicted pain can sometimes feel worse than the tragedies that we have no control over because we had a choice in that. We had control over that, but we chose not to do anything beneficial with it. And so what do we need to do? We need to start regaining control, right? Like if you guys have seen the video clip of the Representative Maxine Waters, she says, I'm reclaiming my time, right? We need to reclaim our time. We need to acknowledge that even though we don't have control over everything in our lives, there's a lot that we don't have control of. There's political rhetoric, there's the things that our family and friends say and do, right? And then there's when our children leave our homes in the morning, we don't have control over exactly what happens in those moments, right? But we do have control over one thing every single moment of every single day of the life that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. And that's what we choose to do with that moment. Just that moment. That's what's in our grasp. And our choice in how to respond to that moment is within our control every single second of the day for most of us, alhamdulillah, those who are physically and mentally capable, right? So it's not, you know, we hear a lot of people say, the past is eating away at me. It's not the past that's eating away at you. It's the amount of time that you spend carrying it on your shoulders. It's not the future that you're worried about. That's not what's keeping you up at night. It's the amount of time that you spend worrying about the future moments that you have no control over right now. And so taking advantage of the present moment, taking control of that, reclaiming your time, that's one of the ways that we can prevent ourselves from being in the state of loss that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about in this surah. So let's go through the steps that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us as the divine solution to prevent ourselves from being in this state of loss. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. That we're all in a state of loss except those who believe. So what is that? That's faith, right? And so we know the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam, when he goes into a desert with his wife Hajar and their small child Ismail, right? He walks into the desert, he sits them there, and then he starts to leave. And as he's leaving, Hajar starts following him, and she starts asking him, where are you going? Where are you going? You know, like, you're leaving us in here, where are you going? And he's not responding. And then Hajar she asks him, did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala command you to do this? Is this a command from Allah? And he says, yes. And then she says, okay, then he will not neglect us. So I want you to imagine yourself in a situation like that, right? The sun beating down, a small child with you, no sustenance, right? Just a small canteen of water, and responding in the way that she did. That level of faith is something that we can only hope to emulate, right? But if we take advantage of the present moment in the way that we're talking about here, and utilize this component of faith and belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then that's going to help us in the same way that it helped Hajar in achieving our goal. And so how do we do that? A lot of us have probably heard the phrase that timing is everything, right? And timing is indeed everything. When we trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that right now, what is happening in your life, in my life, in our lives right now, that this was what was decreed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this is what we were meant to be living right now, then that is something that helps us to increase our faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That time is a commodity that's within the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that He has timed our life in the way that it needs to be. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Al-Hadi. He is Ar-Rashid. He is the one who guides and the one who directs us to the path that we need to be on. He's the one who perfectly directs all matters toward their proper conclusion. And so imagine the trust that Hajar radiallahu anha must have had in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when she realized that she was alone with her baby in the middle of nowhere, right? She ran out of water, but in response to this situation, she says, I'm satisfied with Allah. He will not neglect us. Where she knew that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Al-Hadi, Ar-Rashid, had pointed and guided her life to the path that she needed to be on right at that moment, even if it seemed hopeless. So when everything is going wrong in your life, when it feels like no matter what you do, things are just not changing, when you study for your classes and you're still doing horribly, when you are trying to get married and everybody in your life is getting married and it's just not happening for you, right? Where you've tried to open a new business and it just keeps failing. Remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Al-Hadi and He is Ar-Rashid. And He is the one who's directing your story and your path to where you need to be in the best possible way and in the best possible time. And so there's a time for everything. Our goals right now should not be exactly the same as our goals last year, because we are different than we were last year. You're not exactly the same person that you were 12 months ago, right? And so your goals should reflect that. That is one of the ways of embracing our faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That having faith that He has placed you where you need to be, and so we align our goals with the life that we have right now, not the life that we wish we had. And that's really important. The next thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in Surah Al-Asr, right? وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. And doing good deeds, putting in the work, putting in the effort, right? So along with having faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we do our part and we do the work, right? A lot of people think that the future is a noun, right? And The dictionary might say that it's a noun, but I'm saying that it's a verb because it's something that we have to work for. It's not something that just we idly come to find. We have to work for it. And it's hard. Focusing in on our long-term goals instead of the instant gratification that we all want to experience, it yields some discomfort in the present moment, but living in the present moment doesn't mean that the present moment's always going to feel good. Sometimes it doesn't feel good at all. But what it helps with is that all the future moments will inshallah feel better, right? Whenever we make easy choices, it yields a harder life. And whenever we make the hard choices in the present moment, it yields an easier life in the long run, inshallah, right? You know, it's like the choice of stopping to get fast food every night on your way to work because it's so tiring, right? Versus you stop going home and having a home-cooked meal. In the moment, it's a lot easier to just go ahead and get the fast food. But the next morning, you feel horrible and you have trouble waking up and you just find yourself gaining weight and not feeling healthy, right? And so the easy choice led to a harder life. And the harder choice leads to an easier one, in this life and in the akhirah, inshallah. So we see this in the story of Hajar, where after verbalizing her faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, saying that she's satisfied with Allah, right? What did she do? She knew that he would help. But did she sit there waiting for him to do it? Did she sit there to wait for rain to fall and fruit to fall from the sky? She didn't. She got up and she realized that once she ran out of milk for her child, she needed to find something so that she could have milk for him. And she ran between Safa and Marwa, the two hills. She ran over and over and over again to make sure that she did not miss out on any possible opportunity to do her part to make sure that she achieved her goal to ensure the survival of her child. And what happens with this is it became what we know as sa'i, right? When we go to Hajj, one of the cornerstones of Hajj is sa'i, where we go between Safa and Marwa 7 times to emulate her struggle. And so somebody who felt so powerless in this moment is an example that we emulate whenever we go on the holiest journey of our lives, subhanAllah. So whenever we experience that sense of powerlessness, whenever we experience that emotional roller coaster that comes with, I have a goal, I've been working, or it's just not happening for me, things are just not going well, everything is falling apart in my life. Whenever we feel powerless, we keep in mind that the journey is part of the goal, and that struggling is part of the journey, right? And that's the definition of sa'i. Actually, it literally means struggle. And so is there anything quite as terrifying as being a mom in the middle of a desert with no one around, no sustenance, and seeing your child dying of thirst in front of you? Or is there anything as terrifying as the story of Yunus alayhi salam, where he's swallowed into the belly of a whale and he's surrounded by darkness in a completely unfamiliar environment where there's no possible way out? Despite feeling terrified, despite the hopelessness in a situation like those situations, despite their powerlessness, inaction, not acting, was not an option for them. What did they do? Hajar, 7 times between the hills, in the hot sun, right? Yunus alayhi salam, he prayed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He prayed with his entire heart, asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for help, knowing that the only way out was through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved them both. And he responded to Yunus, and he said, so we responded to him, and we saved him from distress, and thus we saved the believers. So believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, trust in him, but strive and do your part too. Because trusting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala includes trusting the capabilities and the tools that he has given us. He's given these to us, and that's part of trusting him, is utilizing them. And so we tell ourselves that we need to strive. But how do we strive? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala answers this question in Surah Al-Asr as well, where he says, وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, for those who believe, إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَتَوَاسَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاسَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. He ends it by saying, those who encourage one another in truth and those who encourage one another in patience. So in truth, how do we strive using truth? Truth to ourselves and truth to Allah. That whatever we are striving for needs to be in line with our purpose. And what's our purpose? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us that He did not create us except to worship Him. So if our goals are not in line with what's pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then they're not worth striving for, right? And so in order to live our personal truth, it has to be in line with the truth of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One way that we tend to lose our truth is by overly focusing on the end result, right? That we feel like we've failed if we haven't achieved the exact goal that we were looking for. But does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward us for the end result, or does He reward us for our efforts? He rewards us for our efforts, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, is there any reward for good other than good? He doesn't hold us accountable for the end result as long as we're doing our part. The other thing that prevents us oftentimes from living our truth is our fears. Our fears prevent us from working toward our goal. We can't be fully true to ourselves, and we can't fully be the best person that we want to be in our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if our lives are dictated by our fears. So we've talked about making a choice to strive, making a choice to live in the present moment, right? But indecision, being paralyzed by fear, that's also a choice. When you decide to do nothing, that's also a choice. You think that you're saving yourself because you're not making a choice, but you're making a choice in that moment. You're making the choice to do nothing. You're making the choice to be stagnant. You're making the choice to allow your fears to dictate your life. You're making the choice to allow yourself to be determined by what's happening around you and what you're afraid of, what others are going to say, what others are going to do, instead of what's happening within you. And that's a very powerful choice, but it's not the kind of power that we want to have. So we ask ourselves, what is the worst thing that can happen? List your fears. We talk about, you go on Facebook now, you find all the New Year's resolutions and things like that. Everybody talks about their goals. Think about what your fears are. What is stopping you from achieving the goals that you've been trying to achieve for the past 5 years? What are you afraid is going to happen? And if that were to happen, how would you deal with it? A lot of times when we can allow ourselves to explore the worst case scenario, it loses its power. It's not quite as scary anymore once we deal with it and once we figure out how we will deal with it if it were to come to pass. And the other thing to ask yourself is the cost of inaction, right? If I don't change anything, what will my life look like tomorrow, in 6 months, in 1 year, in 3 years? Because that's a choice too, right? And sometimes the picture that you paint of what your life will look like if you choose inaction is scarier than what your life will look like if you choose action and you actually face that fear that you have. And that's what we need. The fear of inaction needs to be greater than the fear of action. The fear of what will happen if you choose to do nothing needs to be greater than the fear of what will happen if you choose to do something. And that's how you make a change. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ says that the strong believer is better than the weak believer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, although both are good. He says, strive to do that which will benefit you, seek the help of Allah, and do not feel helpless. Don't allow your life to be dictated by your fears. As long as your goals and your life are in line with your truth and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's truth is, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will help you and no effort will go wasted. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-haq. He is the one who is the truth. As long as your haq, your truth, is in line with al-haq, the one who is the truth, then you have nothing to fear. You have nothing to worry about. The final component that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in Surah Al-Asr, right, is patience. وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. Sabr, patience. The ones who encourage patience. That is the final component in the divine solution to how we can achieve our goal and how we can prevent ourselves from being from amongst those who are in loss, in this life and in the hereafter. So the process we talked about is part of the journey, right? You're not going to reap the fruits of your efforts immediately after the seeds have been planted. But we naturally, as human beings, we want big changes. When you're tired of your job, you think about quitting your job and backpacking through Europe or getting a job place far away. You're tired of living with your parents, so you imagine applying to college halfway around the world, right? We always think of the huge changes that we want to make. But the problem with this mentality is that the huge changes are often so daunting and so scary that indecision is what we do, right? We just don't do anything, right? We just choose to do nothing because what we're aiming for is so huge that we don't even know where to start, right? And the other thing is, even if you do go ahead with that huge change, a lot of times what ends up happening is that what you chose ends up not feeling as good as you thought it would. And so you're really disappointed. You realize that not all of your problems are solved by this huge change that you've decided to do. So realize that nobody runs a marathon on day one. It takes patience, it takes work, it takes consistent effort, the small moments added together to become something amazing. So consider the example of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the example of Allah is the highest of all examples, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Allahu alladhi khalaqa as-samawati wal-arda wa ma baynahuma fi sittati ayyam. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the heavens and the earth and everything in between in 6 days. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one being who can create a massive change in the blink of an eye, in a snap, right? He could change the entire earth and every single one of us within just a moment. He says, kun fayakun, be and it is. But what did he choose to do here? He chose to do it in 6 days. And if that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does, then why do we expect ourselves to be able to make huge changes in the blink of an eye? We have to have patience, right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is teaching us patience through his incredible example. And just look at nature, subhanAllah, like the tallest, I looked it up, the tallest tree in the world is a redwood, 379 feet tall. And how long did it take to grow from a seed to that height? Almost a millennium. And how did it do it? Through small, consistent changes. It didn't happen overnight. Everything majestic, it doesn't happen overnight. The goals that are worth waiting for are the ones that we strive for. Those are the ones that we consistently strive for. And we have to be patient through them because change in our lives, in nature, in everything, it's a process, it's not an event. And so we often think that, like somebody who doesn't wake up for Fajr at all, right? Just like, okay, I'm going to make a huge change. I'm going to wake up for Qiyam al-Layl. I'm going to stay up all night, every night, right? And that's going to be my change. Instead, try and start waking up for Fajr every day, right? Or try add 2 rak'ah sunnah to after you pray Isha. Small changes that are part of your daily habit, those are the ones that we're more likely to actually achieve, right? And it's the small choices in the process that create the journey. The Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that the most beloved of deeds to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are those that are most consistent, even if they're small. Because it's human nature that we need to change gradually. And so as a final note to end, when I am losing motivation, right? When I have a goal that I'm working toward, it's not going the way I want, and I'm struggling to be patient in the process of it, when things are draining bit by bit, the way that I get my motivation back is I think about the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that he is al-muqaddim and al-mu'akhir, the expediter and the delayer, the one who brings forward and the one who holds something back to put it in its proper place. So you might be looking to get married as soon as possible, right? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala might be holding you back from that because the person that you're meant to be with is not at a stage in life where they're ready to be married, right? You might be struggling in your classes and you feel like you're moving backwards in your academics. But maybe this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's way of pushing you forward toward a major or a field that you never would have explored if you weren't struggling right now, right? And so the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, what has reached you was never meant to miss you, and what has missed you was never meant to reach you. So right now, at this very moment, at this time in your life, you're facing what you need to face in order to flourish and to become the person that you need to be. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows every possible scenario and path that your life could have taken, but He chose to place you right here. And that tells you something incredibly powerful. It tells you that you are enough. It tells you that you are enough to handle what you're being faced with. That at this very moment, you are equipped to strive. That whatever you're seeking to achieve, whatever you're struggling with, you are equipped to do it. If you feel like there are relationships in your life that are distant from you, people that you care about, conflicts, don't wait for the other person. Don't wait for divine intervention. You are equipped to strive for it. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told you that you are enough because He placed you there, right? So whatever you are seeking, just realize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed you exactly where you need to be at this very moment, and you are poised to take that first small, deliberate step in the right direction that will bring you closer to your goal and inshallah closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us from amongst those who live each moment to the fullest in a way that's pleasing to Him, and to be from amongst those who embody the attributes of faith, effort, truth, and patience. Ameen. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.